Rhona Goskirk, Zoe Henry, Marlon Dingle, Mark Charnock, and their family find themselves in a horrific situation in Emmerdale after discovering exactly how ruthless and dangerous drugs boss Celia Daniels, Jay Griffiths, is. Their daughter April, Amelia Flanagan, finally admitted to them that she'd been coerced into dealing drugs for Celia and her son Ray, Joe Absalom. Before they could go to the police or take any other action, Celia paid them a visit. She showed them a live stream on her phone of April's boyfriend Dylan, Fred Kettle, being deliberately run over by Ray, and the family realized they were all in huge danger. Marlon and Rhona came up with a plan to flee the village with their kids, but this was thwarted by Ray. In upcoming episodes, Marlon and Rhona keep a vigil by Dylan's bed as he recovers in hospital, trying to keep him safe from Celia and Ray. Their hope is that Dylan will eventually tell the police everything he knows and Ray and Celia will be arrested. Meanwhile, April is terrified of the repercussions if Dylan was in hospital. He had made it for now, but the knowledge of what Celia and Ray could do sat in Marlon and Rhona's kitchen like a poisonous pet. They tried to be brave. They sat through hours at Dylan's bedside, traded stories with nurses, watched monitors flicker. The hospital corridors were long and brightly lit, the kind of light that exaggerates every shadow. Every visitor that went in or came out looked like a judge. Rhona held Dylan's hand. Marlon swore quietly into his fist. April kept looking over her shoulder, as if at any moment the world might tilt and Ray would appear in the doorway. When Mary told them she'd been on a retreat, a voice of calm and old-fashioned certainty returning in her letters and postcards, Rhona felt two opposing urges. One was an aching, childish need to run into her mother's arms and tell her everything, because there is a particular safety in the honesty of the people you love. The other was a cold, adult calculation. That honesty could be a blade. Mary would ask the right questions in the wrong places. Mary would write down details. She had been a journalist once, a dogged, tenacious one who'd unearthed stories where others had found dust. Rhona loved that in her, she admired it. Right now it terrified her. The first attempt to keep Mary away was small and shapeless. Gentle persuasion over the phone, a false smile, and a flurry of excuses. "You mustn't come back yet, Mum. It's not safe. Just a little longer at the retreat, please." Mary's reply had been practical and maternal and entirely uncompliant. "I'll be back when the retreat ends. Don't send me away, child. Whatever it is, we deal with it." Rhona's chest constricted. Her plans, which had felt ingenious in the wet, sleepless hours of the night, started to feel transparently childish in daylight. She had no legal evidence. She had no safe house to send her mother to. The police weren't an option while Dylan's testimony hung in the balance. She could sit and wait and pray, or she could take action that would look monstrous to anyone who didn't know the whole story. That night, sleep fled. Rhona sank onto the sofa and watched Mary's postcards as if they were messages from a life that once belonged to someone else. Mary's handwriting, that firm, looping script, seemed to scorn the ticking clock of Rhona's fear. She stared at the ink until the letters blurred, then at April, sleeping under a fleece on the other sofa, her face slack and young and trembling with the future. Rhona imagined Celia smiling as if the butcher's block were merely a new business plan. The image had the power of a command. It told her what she must do. She rehearsed. Then she changed her plan. And then, fatally, she let the coal in her chest guide her words. Mary's return was ordinary in its first moments. She stepped out of a taxi with her travel bag and a sunburn that made her look younger than her years. Her eyes lit up at the sight of her children and grandchildren. She enfolded April in a hug that smelled of lavender and the church hall kitchen where she'd first learned to braid scones. It should have been the most normal of evenings. Rhona closed the door behind them and watched Mary's expectation like a window into a different life. She felt the coal simmer. "Mum," she said, and the word came clipped, carefully neutral. It was the first fracture. They sat to dinner. Marlon tried to make conversation, clumsy jokes, a calm attempt to anchor the room. But Mary was alert. She noticed everything. She noticed the quiet on the mantel. She noticed the extra plates in the cupboard. She noticed April's hands, the way they never stopped moving, a metronome of worry. "You've been away a long time," Mary said finally, eyes piercing. "You're not yourself." Rhona blinked. She had hoped to make this easy, plant doubts about staying, suggest the retreat had changed things. Instead, Mary's look pulled at something old. She'd risked the entire thing on the idea that a mother would be angry enough to leave. She hadn't considered that Mary would be curious first. So Rhona lied, and then lied with the precision of someone carving pattern into flesh. It's just you don't understand, Mum. She kept her voice flat, clinical. You haven't been here for years. You weren't here when we needed hands. When the children were small, and my back was breaking, I got up at night alone, Mum. You were off gallivanting, finding yourself, as you called it. You come back now and everyone expects you to do what? Make tea? Sit with clouds around you and pretend? We don't need a ghost. We need someone who will step up. Mary's face changed, folded. Rhona, it's not. Oh, don't do the soft voice with me. Rhona felt the sound of her own words ricochet inside her, blacker each time. You left. You left us a long time ago. You had opportunities to be there, and you chose not to. You're useless, Mum. You're a liability. You bring trouble with your curiosity. You pick at things and then you gloat about it. You make messes. The room contracted. Marlon's fork tapped on the plate like a metronome of panic. April's eyes shone, a reflection of hurt and astonishment. Mary's face for a moment did what no one expected. It didn't flare with anger, it stilled into a quiet horror. I thought coming home would mean something, Mary said, voice thin. I thought you'd be glad. I am glad you had your spiritual holiday, Rhona said. The words tasted like rust. But you have to go, Mum. For your own good. For everyone's. You're not wanted here. It was monstrous. It was a calculated cruelty, an attempt to make rejection stick hard enough that Mary would believe it and, more importantly, act on it. Rhona watched the plan unfold with the critical eye of a surgeon who has already cut more than she wanted. Mary gathered her bag slowly, her hands rolling the leather handle as if she had always known it. I'll go, she said. Her voice was steady, but there was a crack in it like a sudden winter light through thin glass. If that's what you want. Rhona felt victorious for a second. Then shame like a physical thing, heavy and sudden. She had made the choice. She had pushed her mother away with words that would echo for years. Mary did not argue. She did not throw pots. There was no dignified exit, no parting sermon. She walked out into the November rain and left a wet imprint on the step where she had once stood as a child to wave at a returning husband. She closed the gate, and the sound of it was a small, irreparable thing. Later that night, after Mary's taxi had trundled away and the house settled into a brittle silence, Rhona's rehearsed calm began to splinter. She pictured Mary sitting in a small, unfamiliar room in some anonymous B&B, turning over the emptiness Rhona had put into words. She pictured the postcard with her handwriting, the same ink now bleeding in the rain. You did it, Marlon said softly, as if stating a fact might make it easier to bear. You kept her safe. Rhona wanted to believe him. She forced her face into a kind expression and buried the scream that wanted to come out. We did what we had to, she said. It was a small lie, but the kind that hardens quickly into a habit. Even as she comforted herself, the world outside remained mercilessly real. Dylan's recovery was a fragile thread. Every time a nurse leaned toward the bedside to whisper a prognosis, Rhona held her breath. April stayed close to Dylan's bed like an anchor, pleading silently that he wouldn't talk, that he wouldn't reveal the names and the addresses and the secret shipments. She begged at night, eyes hollow and childlike. Please tell me you'll be careful. Please don't go to the police. Inside the house, Rhona checked doors and locks as if bolting the house might bolt time itself. She watched for the telltale black SUV in the lane. She measured the movements of each family member. What they said, how they said it. Her husband's shoulders had thickened with responsibility. Marlon looked older at the edges, as if worry had the power to erode a face. Yet Rhona could not rest. She couldn't sleep because the plan, honed in terror, contained its own unanticipated cruelty. She had told Mary that she was an irritant, that her curiosity would bring ruin. She had told her she was worthless. The lie worked. It had done exactly what she intended. But the backside of the victory was a raw, aching pity that hummed like a low bell. Mary did not go to the police. She did not come back with a lawyer or a righteous vengeance. She sat in the dingy room of a boarding house and wrote letters she never sent, words to a daughter who had pushed her away in the name of safety. The cruelty of the act was not in absence of reaction. It was in the silence that allowed the wound to harden. Rhona felt the wound, too, in a place she could not reach. Celia's reach did not slacken because one family member left the village. If anything, the pressure grew. Ray, torn between a craving for control and a rare, dangerous tenderness at the edges of his life, became more reckless in ways that made the family's blood run cold. He began to change the rhythm of his patrols. He stopped smiling in the old way. Celia watched from the side like a predator assessing a den of prey. This is our last run, she told Ray once, her voice like a silver knife. We move. Clean slate. New land. No loose ends. The threat of extraction, not an act of kindness but of business, made the village feel like a stage to be cleared. Celia's cold logic had no regard for Christmas lights or the fragile sanctities of a small life. She considered March and barns the same way a landlord considers houses. Shift the operation, dismantle the risks. They're an irritant, she said to Ray, and Ray's eyes were the sick look of someone who had lost a map. Rhona kept her eyes on the family, but even from across the kitchen she could feel the throb of what she had done. Mary had not been safe because she'd been pushed away. A different danger had crept forward, one that Rhona had not anticipated: the erosion of trust. April, who had watched her mother hurl those words like stones, wore an expression of a witness who had seen the wrong person punished. It was the only way, Rhona told herself until it was like a prayer. She told Marlon the same line when he stared at her with the weary, questioning look of a man who knew his wife had done something monstrous and necessary. We did what we had to. We kept Mary safe. Later, when Mary called, only one call, a thin thread, her voice was small and brittle. I'm all right, she said. I can manage. There was no accusation. There was no pleading. But there was a sound beneath the words that Rhona could not mend. The sound of someone folding away hopes. Rhona lied and told her mother that she had made the right choice. She uttered the phrase until it hollowed. At Dylan's hospital, she whispered the same words into machines that blinked back. She slept badly. She ate less. She smiled poorly. The house was clean and sterile, the way a life looks when it's been painted over to hide a crack. And still the coal burned. A fortnight later, a different kind of sound came. Ray had been seen with a bag. A small, furtive exchange under the lamplight by the old mill. Moira had noticed it and asked too many questions. Rumor sprouted teeth. Celia's business, always delicate, felt like a high wire. She tightened. We move, she said again, this time in public, and it landed on the Dingles like a cold forecast. Rhona listened to the village whisper and understood the meaning. They would be moved. The family would be taken out. As terrifying as it was to imagine the long arm of Celia's operations dragging them away, an equally stark horror settled across Rhona's ribs. What would moving mean for Mary, for the family? Would it catch up with them in the new place? Would the wind always be a carrier of rumors, and the circles of old sins follow like dogs? When Christmas lights began to straggle up across the village, the season itself seemed to mock the family's fractured peace. People made mince pies and waved to one another. Rhona made lists and checked them twice, and let herself be carried sometimes by small, domestic routines. She bought a small, ridiculous tree and set it up low so April could decorate it without climbing. They put ornaments on one evening, and did not talk about Mary. Rhona kept herself from looking at the empty place at the table with a firmness that was almost a new kind of cruelty. She told stories about Mary as if she were a photograph, carefully kept but not to be opened. Then, on a night of pounding rain and the smell of bread coming from the bakery, a message came that made the blood run cold. Mary had been asking questions in the wrong place. She had asked after Dylan at a chemist, where she thought she had overheard a conversation. Someone had told her to mind her own business. Someone else had recorded her talking to a neighbor. It was a small thing, a whisper in the stream of gossip, but Celia heard it. And like a tide she moved. Rhona's stomach dropped as she heard the news. She had driven Mary out so the danger would be away from her. The cruelty of that night returned, inflated. She saw the same ragged punctuation she had planted in Mary's life, now being used by the world to aim at them. The lie that had been a lifeline to keep Mary away had become a mirror for the danger. In that instant Rhona understood what losing her mother would cost. Not only a person, not only a heart, but the clean anchor of the past. She had tried to trade one kind of risk for another, and had discovered that both were poison. The final scene of this chapter was not the cinematic showdown Rhona had imagined in her dark hours. There was no wild chase, no dramatic courtroom. Instead, there was a long, rain-drenched morning in which Marlon and Rhona were up early, packing small things into a battered holdall, speaking in the low, urgent language of people who have decided the next. Thanks for watching. Don't forget